Hey guys, welcome back to Grizzly Valley. Today I'll start work again, strangely enough, on the Mainstreet. This time with a more European touch than the very American Disney style Mainstreet which I had last time. And I promised that I would elaborate a little bit more on that concept in this video, so here it goes. It's basically very much inspired by the 3 World Expos that were held in Paris quite a long time ago now, which were in 1878, 1889 and 1900. And the idea really comes from some posts on Shaga's World by Leonidas, who's always been a really big inspiration to me in Rollercoaster Tycoon 3. And basically the World Expos were where everybody got together to Paris to marvel at the architecture in all of the different places in the world, and where there was a lot of beaux-arts and nouveau art kind of architecture that really stemmed from that. Though please, excuse me for my French pronunciation, I dropped French class in high school because fuck that shit, honestly. But yeah, I think it's really beautiful and it's something which I wanted to try. It's maybe a bit too, well, ambitious, I should really say, and it's something that I definitely want to return to in future updates in the game when more pieces are available to actually fit the theme, because I'm definitely stretching things and I'm more or less using it as an opportunity to get the general shapes of the buildings done and just sugarcoat things with the things we have at the moment, but it definitely won't be the exact same style given the limitations of the objects that we have right now. So it's very much like the place where this all kicked off, but it's not going to be 100% what it's going to be like, definitely not. But yeah, that's really the entire idea behind what I wanted to try in this Mainstreet. This building in particular is going to really be the main monument and most recognizable building of the park. I should probably say a weenie. Basically the issue is that I had to have a weenie at the end of the Mainstreet, much like Disney has their huge castle, to have that high point to look forward to as you walk over the Mainstreet. But I definitely can't have a very high castle behind this, since obviously there's a roller coaster in the way there, and this park wasn't too well planned or laid out. And in general, when it comes to theme parks, there's a very important distinction that you have to make, which is something that I haven't really explained in any earlier videos, I think. And while it's sort of common knowledge alongside theme park enthusiasts, it's something to keep in mind, is that when you can really make distinctions between 2 parks at a very basic level, it's that you have planned parks and pre-laid out I should say you have the planned parks and the parks which sort of grow very naturally, and most of the parks actually belong to the ones that just sort of grow in whatever way. But you also have the parks which are planned out like Disney and completely built in one go and then opened. And the big difference in there is that with parks like Disney, everything really fits together in an almost symmetrical park layout and everything is very well planned, whereas with other parks everything is still planned but it grows more organically. It's much like planned cities versus cities that grow organically over time. And this park is definitely a park that just sort of isn't planned really, but sort of grows, but it's still quite heavily themed. And that basically meant in the end that I ended up with having a Mainstreet, but still not having it planned out that well, so that's one of the reasons why I also wanted to make a more curved and random Mainstreet than the very straight Disney-like Mainstreet, which I felt would really clash with how the rest of the park is laid out. And it's also a problem because I obviously can't fit a weenie in at the end of the Mainstreets. So in the end I opted to have a weenie in the shape of this pretty big tall building over here, which is very heavily inspired by the Brazil pavilion of the World Expo in Paris 1889, which is a really beautiful building. The biggest thing that I definitely, well, nearly stole from it is the shape of the tower, which is something which I like. One of the main issues, or at least limitations I should say, with the pieces that we have in the game so far is, for me at least, that there's a huge lack of spires, like the really fancy pointy roof type spires that you would see on well, Disney castles or on church towers. The more like the very big eye catchers when it comes to buildings. Those types of roofs are something that we don't really have yet, but I still wanted to make a building which would be quite tall and have this more pointy shape towards the top, and I really felt this was one of the only ways to go about doing so. Still keep everything not roof and keep it in stone details, but have a general shape of a building which is quite tall and really stacks up to be a very pointy, almost spire-like thing to look forward to as you're walking over the main streets. This would be the main thing which looms over all of the other buildings, and I think it's also a pretty good building to keep, not just as a main building to the main streets, but also for the park in general. Like one, real eye-catcher of the park itself, and really this distinctive building. So yeah, that's the idea behind it. It is inspired by the Brazil Pavilion, but it's mostly visible in the tower, and the rest was just sort of figure out what would work best with the pieces that we have at the moment. And definitely a lot of sugar coating as well. It's just a very good opportunity to build a simple building and then just put many details onto it. At some point it's bound to look good, as long as you have that basic sort of shape right, which I felt pretty comfortable with at this point in time, with having that tower over there and this thing stick out, which is going to face a plaza in front of this building. And then alongside the side of this though, I'll still continue it, at least in the sense that there will be some other facades next to this facade which have the same textures and overall style, but still make them slightly different. Obviously, in the real theme park sense, this is going to be one building with just facades to make it look all detailed and nice from the front, whereas in reality this is just one big fake block of boring greyness in, well, a realistic sense, with just the little details and decorations in front of it. I still wanted to make it seem like it's, again, a couple of loose buildings that fit together. But yeah, this first part is the part that was really most inspired by the Brazil Pavilion, and what I took most of the ideas from, really. I wanted to have some classical hints in there, which wasn't quite easy, and it might actually be possible, but I still haven't really found a way to get the very specific classical details in there. Like, especially with beaux-arts kind of buildings, I would have really loved to have the very details of the pillars and the things that are put on them be more specifically like they are in real life. But I really just ended up with going with the random things that we have in the game to detail this building, and just sort of pop them here and there in whatever way would seem most fitting. And it's almost really Russian in the type that the decorations are just about scattered everywhere. But yeah, that's what basically the entire idea was behind making this building look a little bit more detailed. Obviously, also, since it is the main eye-catcher building, I also want to make it at least put a little bit more effort into all of the detailing of the building. Hence also why this episode, and god, I didn't even talk about that yet, this episode is going to consist of just this building, the couple of facades next to it, and the plaza, which is going to be in front of it, because this turned out to be quite a time-consuming thing, and I'm not even counting the couple of takes that it took to actually get things on the right path, because as much like these time lapses always seem like one very smooth in-game experience getting everything right from the start, there are some videos, and this is one of them, in which I did miss a couple of things here and there and had to start over a little bit to make the video at least a little bit less messy, and cut out some of the parts of me building stuff and then figuring that's not really gonna work, and coming back at it at some point in the future. So yeah, here's the laying out of the path, and I really wanted to make it quite curved and not have it completely straight from the path entrance. I still have no idea how I'm actually going to connect the path entrance to that, but yeah, that's just an issue I'll look at in the future, and as long as it's in the future I don't have to worry about it yet, or so I like to escape all my problems in life. So yeah, I'm not really going to worry about that too much yet. Basically, it's just going to be this main plaza in front of this building, and some curvy roads around this. I also wanted to make sure to have this plaza in such a position that you would still be able to see the tower of this building as you actually enter the park, and maybe even as you approach the park entrance, because it's really supposed to be that Disney castle type weenie, but you still can't really, you know, see it from a very straight line as you would have in a Mainstreet, where everything is perfectly straight and calculated. So I had to at least make up for that by making sure that the curves of the roofs were actually decent. Also, I'm taking every single opportunity that I can to say the word weenie. I'm not gonna lie about that. And there was this thing, which I was actually quite happy about in the end. It's a huge, well, a thing that probably took too much effort. Looking back, there's actually a little bit more feasible way to do this. It's less controllable, but it's definitely less time consuming as well, and probably less poly consuming too. But I basically wanted to have red roofs, and I wanted to have red roofs at all costs, so decided to sink some signs into a roof like this and get a red roof. You can practically get many different colors or textures by using signs like this, but it's a very time consuming thing. Way more time consuming than this 12 times sped up time-lapse would probably make it seem. Though that said, there is still a bit of Z-fighting in there, since there are some overlapping things, and I try to at least alleviate that a little bit by also having the little higher up signs as well, as you can see, sort of over the signs which are all Z-fighting, but there's still a little bit of Z-fighting in there, and it's not the most perfect thing, but I just wanted to have a red roof, and I'm still quite happy with how it turned out in the end. And the rest of the roof actually almost reminded me of like a Hansel and Gretel house, or really some of the decorations that you see perhaps on Austrian buildings that are painted onto the buildings, or more in that corner of Europe as well, where the decorations are not so much balustrades or pillars, but the little curvy different textures on the walls, and especially around the windows I had some extra details and shapes along there which really reminded me of that type of architecture. The rest of this building though, or this building in general I should say, is not really inspired by anything. It's just a general, well, let's see how this is gonna work and let's see where this is gonna go and if I'm gonna be happy with it type of approach, where I didn't really plan anything out otherwise. The only thing that was really planned out, and this was something that I cut out of the time-lapse, was the overall composition of the building, and this is something which you didn't see, but I did a couple of like facade tests to kind of look at how the building would look with different parts added to it in different angles and different heights, and that's the type of stuff which I think is quite important to look at, because nothing's worse than building a building, especially if it consists of different buildings that you can't easily copy it over to another location. Nothing is worse than building a building and then adding all of the details to it and putting so much effort into it, and at the end looking back at it and thinking, well, that's not entirely the shape that I wanted to have. So I really wanted to get that in there first, and then go to all of the ridiculous detailing, like just adding random stuff here and there and see how it would work, which is the real basic approach to all of this. Especially the balcony pieces are really useful in this, and all of the little pieces which have that same sort of concrete texture that these roof pieces and these balcony pieces have, which is definitely makes them very versatile, since they all have the same texture but different shapes, so you can combine them in different ways, especially if they have those little details like the carvings on them, as the pirate shields and the balcony pieces have. Now the last part of this building, just to cover up what is going to be the backstage part of this building really, is just another simple wall and another tower as well, which is almost a miniature version of the tower which I have already. I did also want to get some red roofs in there, so there's a bit more red roof paint. But aside from that, it's a pretty simple addition. One of the things which I'll also be doing with this Mainstreet, which is why maybe this will turn out to be my favorite episode in the end, is that definitely the other buildings aside from this main building are probably not going to be as detailed, or I'm probably not going to end up being as happy with them as I am with this building, since I really wanted to keep the main building of the Mainstreet also the most detailed and the most eye-catching building of the Mainstreet. So I probably won't put as much effort and thought into the rest of the buildings as I really did with this one, which was much more planned out than any of the buildings I've probably done in this entire park so far. But yeah, just so you know, I won't completely throw away the main street and just be like, well, man, this is just gonna have to be here and that's gonna have to be it, and just improvise everything. But it's not going to be as detailed, since this is supposed to be that main eye catcher of not just the main streets, but probably the park in general. Even though I have no idea how this should entirely be tied to the rest of the park. It is quite a random theme when you compare it to the theme of the rest of the park. I guess I could throw it up on the fact that it's like a world theme in general, so using the world expos as inspiration for it does make some sense, but it's also a theme which I want to return to at some point in the future, because it's so very limited at this point in time, and there are just certain things which are, well, just impossible given the fact that we don't have iron girders or different glass structures with which we can build things. So it's definitely a theme that's also best kept, I think, for future episodes, and something that I'll explore a bit more in future episodes as well, with future updates, I should say. But this is really just what I wanted to try at this point in time. But coming back on the weenies, I'm not sure how well I actually went into this topic in last videos. I know I've dropped the name before, but as a general tip, I would say always think of weenies and embrace the weenies, because this is the only type of context in which you can talk about weenies and still sound somewhat professional, and maybe actually improve on your park making skills kind of in the meantime, because weenies are actually quite important, especially if you want to go for that Disneyland type park making in making parks, and it's actually a lot of fun as well. Like, weenies are really those big eye-catching things that you think about, like Cinderella's castle in Magic Kingdom, and well, all of the other weenies that exist, like the big globe, Spaceship Earth, I think, in Epcot. And it not just is something that sort of draws people to a certain area and is really cool to look at, but it can also really be a visual icon for the park. And I guess that's what I was trying to make with this building, even though it's so close to the main streets and it's really a part of it. Really, it's in the end, it's going to be the only building which really stands on its own as well, and it's going to be the tallest building of the park, not counting the castle, which cheats because it's placed on a rock. So I think this should probably be the icon of Grizzly Valley. It'll be hard to get used to, and I almost felt like the first Alpine buildings have sort of subconsciously become the icon of the park already, but I think this palace-ish building in general should probably be it. And yeah, that's just about everything I had to say about weenies. Make sure you keep thinking about the weenies, and maybe if you want to explain stuff to your friends, or you're an aspiring YouTuber or something like that, like me, then weenies are always a great topic to talk about. But yeah, I just wanted to also add some extra detailing around here, and a simple fountain, which I actually came back to an earlier idea which I had for the old Main Street, so maybe there's a bit of legacy of the old Main Street. This is actually very close to the old Main Street's fountain. I basically wanted to have another fountain with a pillar on top of it. Though I think last time I did so, I used a square pillar, and I really didn't want to do that this time, so I actually went with an actual round pillar in this case instead. And I'm not sure what I'll exactly do with the little things around this, like maybe get some small details around the fountain, something which I might still return to in the future, but at this point in the video I just wanted to quickly get some scenery in around this, just so that I could have a decent shot of the buildings to make those look a little bit better for the thumbnail, and also the small cinematic shots at the end of this video, which is something which I didn't want to miss out on either, because it's something which I do like recording as well, and I do like mashing on my keyboard, and something which is probably very helpful in actually trying to make sense of what these buildings look like as you look from the ground and not from an increasingly sped up, or very sped up time-lapse, I should say. So yeah, this is what the building looks like from the only angle from which you can actually view the entire building at once. I am thinking that I may actually put a restaurant over here, just because this is a good angle to look at the restaurant, to look at this building from, but also just to keep the main street a little bit more open, and because a restaurant is of course quite important to have. So this may be an area where I'll actually keep a larger patio up with tables and chairs. And then over here is more from the front with the fountain in front of the building and just the general view of the building, how it looks when you approach it from the park entrance. Yeah, that's basically how it looks. Now in the future, I'll add some more buildings around this and fill the main street up, though also leave some areas more open and add some foliage here and there. So yeah, that's gonna happen at least in the next episode. So thank you guys for watching and see you later.